While we wait for more news about Revenant Hill, let's take a look back at the promotional images and see what we can learn from them. Let's start with the very first image we saw from the team, posted on the website everyone except for Elon Musk is still calling Twitter, back in 2020. Just seeing this image was a huge shot in the arm for me, as it dropped during the height of the pandemic, at a time when my real-life job was a huge mess. And when you combine that with everything else that was going on in the world at the time, things were looking really bleak. Just knowing that Scott and Bethany were out there working on a new video game was a much-needed ray of sunshine. In the image, we see a gravestone in an autumn landscape, with a bird perched on top of it. It's hard to say if this image reflects their current plans for the game. It is 3 years old, but it is in line with what we've seen from more recent material, so I suspect that it is. On the gravestone, we see a bone and a pitchfork forming an X inside of a circle. Pitchforks and bones seem to be recurring images for the game, and to my eyes, it likely represents a union between humans and the undead, which reflects what we've seen in the trailers, where skeletons and farmers are working together for the greater good of a new, egalitarian community. Inside of the circle, between the intersections of the bones and pitchfork, we see 4 images. At the top, there's a crescent moon. On the right, the stars. At the bottom, what appears to be a jack-o'-lantern. And on the left, a leaf. At first, I really wanted to link each of these images to the seasons, but that just doesn't make sense. Rather, I think that these images represent elements that are going to be integral to our egalitarian community. The moon, the stars in the night sky, the supernatural, and the fall. Beneath these images, the phrase, "a season above, a season below," is inscribed on the gravestone. Again, I think this represents the harmonization between the natural world, living people, animals, and the supernatural world, skeletons, ghosts, witches, and warlocks. As in, what affects the natural world affects the spiritual world, and vice versa. If you combine this with the game's theme of class struggles, you could get some really interesting story beats. For example, our protagonist, Twigs, has an owl for a landlord who's charging them rent for living in a log. Does our witch, perhaps, have a warlock or sorceress landlord doing the same thing to her? And if the workers of the lower north are suffering from robber barons and Pinkertons, are there demonic equivalents to those forces in the supernatural world? This is all speculation, but the PlayStation blog does say that we'll have to fight back against the dark forces gathering in the area, and a partnership between the natural bourgeoisie and the supernatural bourgeoisie sounds like one hell of an adversary if you ask me. In terms of the setting of this image, this is probably the abandoned graveyard near the wet log where Twigs takes up residence after the barn he was living in burns down. I'll be curious to see how close the graveyard is to Revenant Hill. I doubt it's all that far away. It might even be in its shadow, so to speak. A season above, a season below is also reminiscent of as above, so below, a phrase that has its origins in Arabic and is also represented on the Magician Tarot card. And interestingly enough, we do see what appear to be tarot cards in one of the promotional images, so it seems that tarot cards and references to them will be pretty central to the game. Moving on to the tarot cards, we see Twigs and what looks like our witch, with 4 of them here in this image. From left to right, we have what appears to be a tree branch, a man wielding an axe beneath a sun, a third card which is largely obscured by our witch's hand, and a snake spitting venom. I have to admit that tarot cards are a bit of a blind spot for me. Most of what I know about them comes from Iron Maiden lyrics I overanalyzed when I was a teenager. So if you see any connections between these cards and real-life tarot cards, let me know in the comments, and I'd be happy to learn more about them. But mechanically speaking, I wouldn't be surprised if this is how we cast magic in the game. We know that magic and the supernatural is going to be at the forefront of Revenant Hill, more so than the hints of it that we saw in Night in the Woods. But I'd imagine it's going to be a low magic setting, one that relies on rituals and ceremonies as opposed to, tossing fireballs and the like. And using tarot cards seems like a fun way of involving us in spellcasting from a gameplay perspective. Moving on, here we've got an image of Twigs and our witch on a bridge in what I presume to be the main town or city of the lower north. I doubt it's our own community. I'll bet this shot comes from early in the game, at a time when our community probably isn't all that built up. But in any case, here we see some of the Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania imagery that didn't quite make it into Night in the Woods. Namely, bridges. I've spoken a lot about Pittsburgh on this channel. I love it out there. But so much of the imagery from Night in the Woods, like big hills and old factories, comes from that region. Bridges are right up there too. It's one of Pittsburgh's key features, and I can't wait to see what other references to that area we see in this new game. But back to the image itself, one of the things that really strikes me is Twigs' dialogue. We've spoken before about the artistic similarities between Twigs and May, but what Twigs says right here is so similar to something May might say that it's impossible for me to ignore. Again, I fully believe that Revenant Hill is a spiritual successor to Night in the Woods, not a sequel or a prequel. But if you are in that camp, here's another point in your favor. I mean, the developers had to know we'd see a similarity here, right? Anyway, in the dialogue, Twigs seems to indicate that they're doing a job for our witch. A job that, it seems, is rather dangerous. It's hard to say what that might be, but I've got a feeling it involves sneaking into a place that our witch can't get into on her own. Maybe it's to get something for one of her spells, gather supplies for the community, or get information she needs. Regardless, I'm sure it's one of the many tasks we'll have to complete for her in order to become a fully licensed familiar. Now, on to the image that serves as the cast photo, so to speak. I'm a member of the Dragon Age community, and something we did during the wait for Inquisition was to give nicknames to the characters we'd seen to help identify them before we get some concrete information on who they are. So I aim to do the same thing in my last video. Starting at the bottom and moving left to right, we've got Miss Marshall, Twigs, our witch, Skeleton Farmer, Professor Mushroom, Scallycap Skeleton, John Henry, Birthday Bear, and Young Farmer. I think my previous video covered my speculation about each of these characters well enough, but a few things about their portrayal in this image in particular do stand out to me. Starting with Twigs, it seems our protagonist has captured a mouse, which will apparently be one of the major features of the game. I can definitely imagine some fun mice-catching minigames. Maybe we'll have to chase them through buildings or forests. But given the social sim vibes of the game, I'm curious to see how often we'll have to do that. If they decide to go all in on these elements, it might be something we'll have to do on a regular basis, along with other tasks, sort of like you see in games like Persona 5. We'll see though. It's hard to say how much social sim stuff we'll actually see in the game until we get our hands on some gameplay. Now, looking at the image as a whole, something that stands out to me is that many of the characters appear to have animal companions of their own. Miss Marshall, Professor Mushroom, and Birthday Bear have cats with them, and it looks like Skeleton Farmer has a chicken. It'll be interesting to see whether or not these companions are familiars, or familiars in training, like Twigs, or if they're just pets. I could see this going either way. Some of their expressions do lead me to believe that they might be familiars, while others are probably just everyday animals. If they are familiars, that would seem to indicate that there are more members of the main cast, other than just our witch, who have magical abilities. If I had to take a guess, I'd wager that Professor Mushroom and Birthday Bear might have some magical inclinations, while the rest of the crew are probably just average folks. One other thing that stands out to me from this image is the flag, which flies above the group, directly behind John Henry. It's simple, brown, and appears to feature a twig on it? I might be wrong, but that's what I see when I look at it. It makes me wonder how integral our protagonist will be to the founding of the community if there's a reference to them right on the flag. The press release does say we'll be building it, which implies that we'll be responsible for bringing members to it. And if so, yeah, I'd say it's fair to put a reference to Twigs on the flag. Now, something we don't see in any of these images is Twigs' landlord, who starts charging Twigs rent after they move into a log near his hill. I'm very interested to see this character and get a vibe on them. Is it possible that they're tied to the dark forces corrupting the lower north? Or are they just a capitalist jerk? I could see it going either way, but my gut feeling is that it's probably the latter. I doubt we'll see those dark forces in earnest until the end of the game, much as we did with Night in the Woods. That wraps up all the promo images, and just about covers all the material we have for Revenant Hill so far. I'm so excited for this game, and I can't wait to find out more about it. Glory Society, best of luck on the road ahead. I think I speak for the rest of the community when I say that we're thrilled to see what you have in store for us. Next time I cover Revenant Hill, we'll be taking a look at the idea that the game is likely a spiritual successor to Night in the Woods, and what that might mean for it. But first, I'll be heading back to Possum Springs to take a look at the last member of the Party Barn Garage Band. So be sure to join me next week. as we discuss the importance of Casey Hartley. Thanks again to my usual collaborators, Wolf.Godwin and Jordi, Jaen, Moreno for my music and channel art. See you guys next time.